Hello again, this is Jason with LMGI, continuing with SolidEdge Fundamentals. Next up is steering wheel deep dive. So this is the course where we're on page 282. A little bit of just terminology first with this steering wheel. It might look like a lot to memorize, but really I like to have people notice that some elements are silver and some are blue. When you click a silver element, it starts to move the geometry that you picked. When you pick a blue element, typically it just moves the wheel, with the exception of this disc in the center. So you essentially have vectors in a linear direction of any of those three axes, X, Y, or Z. I don't really focus on which one is X, Y, or Z too much, except this one does represent the the Z normal to the steering wheel, kind of like the steering column in your car. And then there are some tricks with shift key that I'll show you, but essentially this is a manipulator. So in your activity, this little part, it's a single part. It's a little deceiving because it looks like a assembly, but it's a single part. We want to mount these onto the ends so they sit upright and they're in the middle, and then we're going to kind of weld them on in a sense. Now the reason they look like they're a different color is because they're detached and they're not even solid geometry, and that's the reason we have the check boxes next to these features. So there's kind of faces. You can think of them as hollow shells if you want, that might have come from another design and they're not yet filled with solid material, if you want to think of it that way. Now because we want to move the entire object, you want to make sure you pick everything, because if you pick just one face on these, it won't move the entire piece of geometry. So you can use your ... on your mouse and right click and choose the entire feature, or you can pick it from Pathfinder is also a great way to do it. So the book is going to have you use the steering wheel. Actually, why don't I show you? This might even help a little bit for presentation. Helpers, steering wheel, will go large, hit OK. So now the steering wheel is a little bit bigger. It might show a little better. So this will cause a move in this direction. I'm just going to tap the escape key once, and then I'm going to, you could move in this direction or this direction, tap the escape key, or this direction, tap the escape key. If you click the disc, it will move in X and Y. It's a little difficult to see until you kind of rotate it around. It's actually still difficult to see because this is a 3D space, but it's only moving in an XY manner. It's really hard to see Z in a computer screen, but you can see that it is just moving in that one tool plane. I think it's kind of lined up with that edge. We'll come back to that. So the book will have you maybe rotate this upright first of all. I usually will. Now again, I'm just tapping the escape key. If you have your arrows pointed a little differently when you click, so you may get a negative or a positive number. It depends. So I'll try to point this down and then click up here. So it's having a hard time getting it to be negative, but sometimes that might happen, and usually I like to point the wheel as such and click in the upper area of the torus, and notice the geometry hardly moved at all, and then I start moving my mouse and I can now key in 90, a nice firm 90. So I could now move it down and then I could move it over and such, but there's a really great way that you can work. I'll place this on the midpoint. I can feel it kind of hook up to that, and then I'm going to point my steering wheel by clicking the knob and point it at that midpoint, and make sure you just kind of click the correct arrow and then click the arrow and then move it right to that point. And after it's sitting on that face, you can just simply right click and attach it. And it may or may not ask you whether to add or remove. Sometimes it knows. So there we go, that's fused on. Let's do it again. I will click and release my origin. I'm not holding a mouse key down right now, a mouse button down right now. So I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to click the torus, rotate that 90, and let's position my steering wheel again. Click and release with the left mouse, put it on the midpoint, point, click, click, drop, right click, attach, and add. So now I've attached some geometry that may have come from maybe some other design. Maybe I know that design is proven in the field, and I just want to use it rather than remodel it. So that's an example of working with the steering wheel. There's some other tips you can use. If you hold the shift key down when you click a primary axis here, you can shift it off. You can also shift the rotation off. If you hold the shift while you click the origin, it will maintain its orientation as you move it around. I'm not holding shift down anymore. I'm just moving my mouse around. I'm not even holding my mouse button down. So this allows me to move the wheel around. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the steering wheel. So that's the end of that demonstration.